Little girl shows up for her mom's interview. Millionaire CEO never expected this. The lobby of Grayson Global Enterprises was a place most people enter with trembling hands and racing heart. The billionaire CEO whose name carried both awe and fear. On that crisp Monday morning, the security guard at the front desk froze. So did the receptionist. So did half the interns scurrying across the floor. Because instead of suited man or sharply dressed executive, a tiny figure waddled through the grand revolving door. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, clutched a single folded sheet of paper to her chest with both hands. Her shoes were slightly scuffed. Her pink dress had been washed a few too many times, and her backpack, with one strap broken, swung loosely over her small shoulders. But her steps were steady, purposeful. Her dark curls bounced with each stride as she marched up to the reception desk, eyes barely reaching over the polished counter. The paper she clutched trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from determination too big for her tiny frame. "Good morning," she piped up, her voice soft but certain. "I need to see Mr. Grace. This is very, very important." The receptionist blinked. She glanced around, expecting a parent to rush in, apologizing for a lost child. But no one followed. The girl stood there alone, her wide brown eyes fixed on her, like a soldier refusing to retreat. "This is, Grayson Global," the receptionist stammered, leaning forward. "Sweetheart, are you lost? Who are you here with?" The girl shook her head firmly and placed a folded sheet of paper on the counter, like it was a sacred offering. "That's my mama's resume. She's supposed to have an interview today, but she's sick, so I came instead." The words shattered the silence in the lobby. Interns stopped walking. Executives waiting for the elevator turned their head. The security guard lowered his coffee cup slowly, eyes narrowing, and in the center of the marble palace, this tiny girl stood unmoving, holding hope of her family in her little hand. 2 hours earlier, on the other side of town, the girl, Amara, sat on the edge of a creaky bed in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of instant noodles and damp carpet. Her mother, Elena Johnson, was doubled over in a fit of coughing, a thin hand pressed against her chest. She had been sick for months. Exhaustion, long shifts as a janitor, skipped meals, and stress had worn her body thin. But today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be her chance. Elena had applied to Grayson Global for the position of administrative assistant, a role she knew she could handle, maybe even thrive in. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. It was enough to pay rent, cover medicine, maybe give Amara the childhood she deserved. Amara had watched her mother practice answers for the interview in front of the mirror at night, wearing her one clean blouse. She had seen the way her mother rehearsed a smile, even when she was too tired to stand. But this morning, Elena couldn't even get out of bed. Tears of frustration had slipped down her face as she whispered, I can't make it, baby. They'll give it to someone else. Someone strong. Someone who isn't me." But Amara, with the stubbornness only a 5-year-old fueled by love could muster, stood tall. "Then I'll go." Elena blinked through tears. "What?" "I'll go to the big office. I'll give them your paper. I'll tell them about you. You always say I'm your brave girl, right? I'll show them." Before Elena could protest, Amara had already stuffed a folded resume into her backpack, kissed her mother's forehead, and slipped out the door. Now, here she was, standing at the reception desk of the most powerful man in the city. The receptionist chewed on her lip nervously, whispering to the guard, Should we call someone? Security? Her parent." But Amara interrupted. "Please, my mama's name is Elena Johnson. She's the bravest person in the world, but she's sick today. She really, really needs this job. Can you give her paper to Mr. Grayson?" The guard frowned, but before he could respond, a pair of polished black shoes clicked against the marble floor. The sound grew louder, heavier, commanding silence in the room. The air shifted. The receptionist straightened instantly. The executives nearby stopped whispering. Alexander Grayson had entered the lobby. At 46, Grayson was a man carved from steel. His tall frame filled the space with quiet authority, his jaw sharp, his silver cufflinks gleaming under the lobby lights. He was known for making billion-dollar deals without blinking, for crushing competitors without remorse, for walking past staff without so much as a nod. And he never smiled. The moment he appeared, the room fell into reverent silence. Only Amara didn't bow to it. She turned, clutched her backpack strap, and faced him. "Are you Mr. Grayson?" she asked. He stopped in his tracks, one eyebrow arching ever so slightly. His cold blue eyes scanned the child, the folded resume, the stiff receptionist. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low, smooth, and commanding. "I am." The receptionist quickly stammered, "Es, sir." This little girl, but Amara cut her off. She stepped forward and held the resume out with both hands like it was a priceless treasure. "This is my mama's paper. She was supposed to talk to you today, but she's sick, so I came instead." The billionaire stared at her, unmoving. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Most people expected him to wave her off, to call security, to walk past her without acknowledgement. That was what Alexander Grayson was known for: efficiency without emotion. But something in the way the little girl's hands trembled, something in the way her chin lifted defiantly even as her voice wavered, made him pause. For the first time in years, the billionaire CEO hesitated. He took the resume from her small hands and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the paper. Neat, simple, nothing impressive at first glance. A single-page resume from a woman with a history of janitorial work, receptionist duties, part-time caregiving. Nothing that screamed corporate elite. But the paper was worn, folded carefully, the ink slightly smudged where someone's fingers had traced it too often. He looked back at the girl. "And why?" he asked slowly. "Did you think you could bring this to me?" Amara swallowed hard, but stood her ground. "Because my mama's strong. She takes care of people. She never gives up even when it's hard. She says work is about heart, not fancy word. And I thought, maybe if you knew her heart, you'd give her a chance." The silence that followed was deafening. From a mezzanine level above the lobby, a few senior managers had gathered, watching the scene unfold. Whispers floated down. "Who let a child in here? This is ridiculous. Grayson won't waste his time. She's adorable, but this isn't charity." But there was one man, David Harlow, the company's chief financial officer, who didn't look away. He studied Grayson's face closely, noting the flicker of something unfamiliar in his icy expression. "Interesting," David muttered under his breath. "He's listening." Grayson folded the resume neatly and tucked it under his arm. Then, to the shock of everyone in the lobby, he crouched slightly so his eyes met Amara's. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amara." "Well, Amara," Grayson said, his tone clipped but not unkind, "I do not usually take meetings arranged by children. But since you came all this way," he glanced toward the receptionist, who looked like she might faint, "I suppose I can make an exception for 5 minutes." Amara's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, but only 5. He straightened, his tall frame once again radiating authority, and gestured for her to follow. The girl clutched her backpack straps tighter and nodded fiercely. The billionaire led the 5-year-old through the glass doors into the private elevator. The lobby remained frozen. A room full of people who had just witnessed the impossible, Alexander Grayson making an exception. That was only the beginning. Because in that 5-minute meeting, the little girl was about to say something that would shake the billionaire CEO to his core and force him to face truths he had buried for decades. The elevator doors slid shut with a whisper, cutting off the gasps and whispers from the lobby. Inside, silence pressed against the mirrored wall. Alexander Grayson stood tall, hands clasped behind his back, his steel blue eyes fixed on the floor number display as it climbed higher and higher. Beside him, Amara barely reached the chrome railing, her tiny hand gripping it for balance. She peeked up at him once, then twice. He was a giant in her world, every inch of him sharp and polished, like the marble lobby she had just marched across. His silence was heavier than anything she had ever felt. Finally, she blurted out, "Do you always look so serious? Or is today special?" For a fraction of a second, Grayson's jaw twitched. He glanced down at her, studying her round, earnest face. No one had spoken to him like that in years. Not employees, not executives, not even investors who had known him for decades. He didn't answer, but Amara nodded as if he had. "It's okay. My mama says serious faces usually mean serious heart. Do you have one of those?" The elevator pinged, saving him from answering. They stepped into the 42nd floor, the inner sanctum of Grayson Global. The glass-walled boardroom stretched before them, overlooking the city skyline. Normally, this space was reserved for negotiations, acquisitions, and battles that decided the future of industry. Today, a 5-year-old in scuffed shoes marched across its gleaming floor. Executives seated around the table blinked in disbelief. David Harlow, the CFO, raised his brows with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Alexander," he said carefully, "what's this?" "This," Grayson replied, placing Elena Johnson's resume on the table, "is our next meeting." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few tried to hide their smirk. One executive whispered too loudly, "He's entertaining children now?" "What's next? Story time." Amara, catching the words, shot the man a glare sharp enough to silence him. Then she pulled herself up into one of the massive leather chairs, her legs dangling far above the floor. She placed her small hands flat on the glossy table, like she had seen her mother do with bills at home. "My mama's sick," she began, her voice steady despite the size of the room and the weight of the stairs. "She was supposed to be here. She practiced really hard, but she couldn't get up today. So I came." The executives shifted uncomfortably. Grayson said nothing, only leaned back in his chair, studying her. Amara continued, she's not fancy. She doesn't wear shiny shoes, but she works harder than anyone. She cleans schools and stays late so the kids have safe halls. She makes soup for our neighbors when they're sick, even when we don't have enough for us. She's strong. She just needs someone to give her a chance. Her voice cracked on the last words, and for the first time, her small hands curled into fists. I thought, maybe you would. The room fell silent. The city stretched endlessly behind the glass. But every eye was on the little girl. One executive cleared his throat. Mr. Grayson, with all respect, this is highly irregular. We can't. Grayson's hand shot up, silencing him instantly. His gaze never left Amara. What's your mother's name again? Elena Johnson, she said quickly, relief flashing her eyes at the question. Grayson nodded slowly. And why? He asked, his voice calm but probing. Do you believe she belongs here? This is not charity. It is business. Amara leaned forward, her curls brushing the table. Because she doesn't quit, even when she should, even when she's tired or hurting. She always finds a way. Isn't that what business is? Finding a way when everyone else gives up. Her words, simple but piercing, landed harder than any pitch the executives had heard in years. David Harlow actually leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging his lip. Smart kid, he thought. For Grayson, the words struck a different chord. Against his will, his mind flickered back decades to a cramped apartment not unlike the one Amara came from. His own mother, Maria Grayson, had worked 2 jobs, scrubbing offices by night and waitressing by day, never once complaining, never once quitting. He remembered the way she had said almost the same words Amara had just spoken. Life doesn't hand you chances, Alec. You fight for them. You keep going when others stop. It was a memory he had buried under layers of wealth, success, and ruthlessness. But now, staring at this little girl fighting for her mother, he felt the ground shift beneath him. Grayson steepled his fingers. Very well. Amara, if your mother is as strong as you say, then I will test her. She will have her interview tomorrow. Here, 10 a.m. Amara's eyes widened. Really? Yes. His gaze hardened, though not unkindly. But tell her this, Grayson Global does not give handouts. She will earn her place, or she will not. Do you understand? Amara nodded fiercely, her curls bouncing. She will. You'll see. For the first time in years, Alexander Grayson felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not a smile, not yet, but close. When Amara returned home, clutching the news like treasure, Elena could barely believe her ears. She sat up in bed, coughing, her thin frame trembling. You saw him? The Grayson? Amara nodded proudly. And he said you can go tomorrow, but you have to be strong. Tears filled Elena's eyes. She cupped her daughter's face with shaking hands. Oh, baby, what did you do? Just told him the truth, Amara whispered. That night, Elena ironed her one good blouse again, hands steady despite her weakness. For the first time in months, hope lit her eyes. The interview. The next morning, Elena Johnson walked into Grayson Global, her shoulders square, her steps measured. Amara held her hand all the way to the lobby, then squeezed it and whispered, "Be brave." Elena was escorted upstairs, where Alexander Grayson and David Harlow were waiting. The room that had been filled with smirks and doubts yesterday now brimmed with silent anticipation. Grayson studied her as she entered. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't polished, but her eyes carried the same fire her daughters had. He gestured to the chair. Mrs. Johnson, sit. The interview began. Grayson's questions were sharp, unyielding, designed to cut through pretense. But Elena didn't falter. When asked about her lack of formal training, she answered, I may not have degrees, but I have experience. I've managed schedules, balanced budgets, and solved problems when the stakes were people's lives, not profit. When asked how she would handle pressure, she smiled faintly. Pressure is what's left when you're raising a child alone, with nothing in your fridge but a carton of milk. If I can handle that, I can handle anything. By the end, even the skeptical executives were silent. Grayson tapped his fingers on the table. For the first time, he allowed himself to admit he was impressed. That afternoon, Elena and Amara were called back into the boardroom. Grayson rose from his chair, the resume in hand. Mrs. Johnson, he said, his voice echoing across the glass walls. We don't usually make decisions as quickly, but today we will. Elena braced herself. Amara clutched her hand tight. You are hired. The words seemed to hang in the air. Elena's breath caught. Amara's eyes lit up like fireworks. Really? The little girl gasped. Really? Grayson confirmed. Your mother earned this. Elena covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered, Thank you, sir. You don't know what this means. Grayson looked down at Amara then, and for the first time in years, a genuine smile touched his lip. I think I do. In the weeks that followed, Elena Johnson became more than just an assistant. She became the quiet backbone of Grayson Global. Her work ethic and determination reshaping the atmosphere of the office. But the greater change was in Alexander Grayson himself. The man who never smiled now paused when passing employees in the hall. He asked questions. He listened. Sometimes, late at night, he would catch himself remembering Maria Grayson and the little girl who had reminded him of her. And every so often, a small figure in scuffed shoes would appear in the lobby after school, skipping toward his office. Mr. Grayson, Amara would call, her voice echoing against the marble, and the billionaire, once untouchable, would find himself setting down his papers, kneeling to eye level and asking, "What did you learn today?" Because sometimes it doesn't take wealth or power or even experience to change a man's heart. Sometimes all it takes is a little girl holding her mama's resume. Like, share, comment, and subscribe for awesome and more engaging videos.